Good morning, community. This is Dr. Anita, your host for another episode of Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. Today's podcast is Lived Experiences, and I am so thrilled to be joined by Ms. Stephanie Carter. Ms. Carter is a children's book author with a background in civil engineering. And within the company that she works for, Stephanie serves as one of the founding members and lead recruiters in their internal Black Network organization. And she's going to be sharing with us how to influence children of color to appreciate their natural beauty and know their achievements are not limited by the way they look. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of months.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anita. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
So, the topic of our discussion is this beautiful book, and I hope it's not too shiny. To Love Me is to Love the Skin I'm In. It's a lovely book, lovely story, beautifully illustrated community. I'm not going to give away too much because in the end, we're going to talk specifically about the book. But right now, Stephanie, I just want to know who and what was your inspiration for this book?
So there were a mix of several things that inspired me to write this book. I've always enjoyed writing since I was a kid. I got more into it in high school as I learned more about English literature, and it was always something my parents always encouraged me to do, journaling, writing poetry. So as I got older, one of my goals was always to write and publish a book. I've had that on my bucket list here for a couple years, and I kind of put it off to the side until last year. It was a mix of things. I was on my Instagram one evening just scrolling through stories, and I came across one of my colleagues from UC Berkeley. She had a posting of a little girl that was holding a book, and it was a book that she had recently self-published. And so I, of course, supported her, got the book because it had a really beautiful message, similar or related to kind of the theme, something that would be encouraging for young Black youth. And at that point, I'm like, man, as excited as I was for her success in that, I was also a little bit, I guess, disappointed in the fact that I always had that goal of publishing, and I hadn't done it yet. I had written a couple things, and then, didn't follow through with figuring out the process of how to get it published. And so that kind of re-sparked, okay, she could do it. I could definitely do it. Now I know somebody that's done it, and I can go and ask questions if I have any questions on how to make it happen. But at that point, I'm like, I didn't know what to write about. And so again, it kind of got pocketed for the time being. What brought it back to surface was just kind of a mix of feelings that I had from last year. So, obviously I think everybody could say that with last year with COVID, there was a lot of impacts on our normal day-to-day lives. But what was stirring in me for so long was just feelings of anger and disappointment, and just feeling kind of hopeless when it came to everything that was surrounding, our nation with the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, all of those things, kind of packaged throughout the year with COVID, and dealing with, reeling from a previous relationship that I'd just gotten out of, and the death of my grandmother through COVID. I felt like I needed to do something, and I didn't know what that something was, but there needed to be something positive that I could put out there, because I was worried about, looking at my young nephews who are both young Black boys. How are they going to maneuver through this world if all they're seeing out there are these narratives about, our people being murdered still? And I remember one Sunday morning, I woke up and I just had this story in my head, and I immediately got up, I found a piece of paper and just started writing. And that's how I got the first pages of my book, of To Love Me, to Love the Skin I'm In. And at that point, I knew it had to be a picture children's book. I'm like, I wanted to help people visualize what I was saying and not leave it open for others to create what those images are of the book. And I wanted it to be specific to our young, dark African American women and children, and so that they have something positive out there that they're seeing and instilling in themselves, and it's not just the negative messages that are getting reinforced throughout society. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how it came full circle of me following through with my what started off as just a goal of publishing a book, but something that I'm really passionate about and I'm really proud of.
You should be. And your answer is very similar to how I ended up publishing my books. Like you, I'd seen my other friends and so excited about them about self-publishing, but it was because of last year and the loss of my dad. Thankfully, it wasn't due to COVID, and we were able to give him a beautiful homegoing service before everything shut down. But it was the loss of my dad, the loss of, income for my business, wondering how am I going to keep going. There was a lot to it. And like you, I saw writing my books as something that was quite therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
What I really love about the cover of your book is the fact that these girls look so beautiful. And in my perspective, too often we see pictures or even dolls of darker skinned little girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the beauty is an afterthought because it's not there. They don't take time to draw out the beauty.
Yes.
It's almost as if, well, we have to have this representation of the other end of the spectrum. And these pictures are gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous. And there are a couple of darker skinned girls at my church. And I always make it a point to tell them how beautiful they are because they are. And because of the way society is, when we talk about, back in the 50s and the 60s and the paper bag test, and if you were Black and you were as light as a paper bag, you were considered beautiful, and anything beyond that was not. I'm not as light as a paper bag, so there's all this other stuff that goes along with our colors, right, that even Black folks have a struggle with. So I appreciate you telling us the story of how you got here, because there's so much that I can relate to. So like you, I spent 14 years in the aerospace industry working with engineers similar to you, and they typically have a reputation for being very analytical. How did you tap into your creative side to write this book?
So I my background is in civil engineering, so I have to say that is very true. I am very analytical.
You think?
Yes, every personality test that I've taken says that, and so I think it just goes back to kind of growing up enjoying writing and using. It's always been kind of a therapeutic thing for me of how to get my feelings on paper, writing poetry or, like I said, journaling. And I think I've just over the years through the course of my day-to-day job and having to work with so many different people from so many different backgrounds, I think that just helps me to be able to just sit down, block everything out, and just put whatever I'm feeling on paper, and using that background and knowledge that I learned through school of how to make it sound, the way that I want it to sound. So I think we all have different sides and characteristics to ourselves. So it's just finding, the avenue that works best for us and creating that atmosphere that works best for us to foster and tap into those other talents.
As I was reading, I found your book very relatable, even though it's meant for little girls. And as a young adult, even, I often wondered that if I didn't have green eyes, would anybody notice me enough to know that I do have some brains? So what were some insecurities of yours that might be reflected in the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first page of the book, and I'm not going to give everything away, but the whole premise is Deja, who is the main character of my story, is not feeling comfortable in your skin, and there's a lot of reasons that the book goes into as to why she feels that way. But I remember as a little girl, all the way through high school, even the shift came for me personally through college of always being conscious or self-conscious about how dark my skin is. and always straying away from brighter colors, not feeling beautiful in the yellows or the oranges or the greens, always sticking to navy blues and white or black were three main colors that you would always see me in. And my mom would always tell me, she's like, you're always wearing such dark colors. You need to wear something brighter. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt like I was standing out too much, and it was just too much of a contrast. And that shift came for me in college, and just trying different things. That's the place where you get to try different things. You're kind of away from the nest, and you get to experiment and come into your own. And if you see my wardrobe now, it is very, very bright. I love my skin. It is beautiful. I think the brighter the colors, they look great on me. And so that is something, there's a lot of narratives out there, as I kind of did a reflection back as to why I felt the way that I felt and not feeling comfortable wearing, anything that I wanted to wear. And I wanted to make sure that was a message that was reinforced in the book for young girls.
I've always gravitated to bright colors, and I'm thinking now what I'm wearing is hardly bright. This is not a reflection of my wardrobe at all, and it's probably something I should get rid of. But what I appreciate about the book is it educates young girls and anyone who might be reading along with them. So, for instance, I had never heard of Valerie Thomas or Dr. Alexa Canaday. Did I get her last name right?
Yes.
Canaday. So, how much research did you have to do to find these women?
It took me a couple weeks to find, women that I wanted to put in the book. I think some of the, or at least for the historical figures from the past, I would say I kind of was easily able to pick out, people from our generation now that would go into the book, but finding the research, I was looking for different realms to show. So I wanted to highlight politics, African-American women in politics, women, in kind of the medical field. So I was kind of just putting in some different Google searches, trying to find, women that I could put in the book. And so it took a little bit of time doing that research. But eventually, and then of course, the image, making sure that, wanted to, again, reinforce darker skinned women. So, I just took the time, did a lot of Google searching to find, those that I felt matched with the theme of the book.
So even though we're talking about this beautifully illustrated, well-written book, To Love Me is to Love the Skin I'm In, I actually took some notes while I was reading the book. And you gave us a really nice sampling of role models that any girl or woman could relate to, from our former first lady to an actress to a gymnast. I don't even have to say what her name is after I say gymnast, right? We all know who we're talking about. Yes. But you not only highlighted these beautiful darker skinned women, but the range of their talents, skills, and abilities. Which woman do you most identify with, and why?
That is a really good question. I would say Simone Biles. I'm not a gymnast, but okay. But the fact that she's young, and she's accomplished so much for how young she is, and kind of the way that she maneuvers herself and puts kind of her self-care first, and is able to push through what other people are saying, even if it's the negative naysayers. I really feel connected to her story, and kind of working in the engineering field that I am in now, specifically on the management side in construction, and primarily
white males.
Yes. And so having to, maneuver through that, and making sure that I'm putting myself first and setting a good representation for for our people is very important to me. And I feel like Simone really embodies that and is a great example for our young girls and how to do that. And that's how I try to also maneuver myself and be a role model, that you can get up here and, in a few years, I'm not going to be one of the only few in the position that I am now. I want to encourage our youth to know that they can get there as well.
So let's explore this a little bit. So we talk about Simone Biles. She's world renowned for her athleticism, obviously. I mean, there are even moves named after her because no one else in the world can do them, right? Yes. She's got her style going on. She's got her NFL boyfriend. I mean, she seems to have that, dream life. But now we find out that she's also become very influential in speaking out about mental health and the fact that we need to take care of ourselves. And while some people applauded that and lauded her for it, some people had the nerve to say that she was unpatriotic because she decided to prioritize her self-care other than go out there and dealing with, what was that, the flips? What was it that she had? Twisties. Because she knew that if she couldn't, spot herself in the air, it could be fatal if she came down wrong. Now, when we think about that, and several years prior, when Michael Phelps, after he won his medals for swimming, right? I believe it's Michael Phelps.
Yes. Yep.
After he won his medal for swimming, and then he was sharing some of his mental health challenges. Not only was he appreciated for that, but he became a spokesperson for Talkspace, right? So we've got the white male that, oh, that's great that you're taking care of your mental health. And we've got the Black female who was the captain of the team, but saying, I need to take care of myself. Now we're saying you're unpatriotic. So when you compare and contrast how you identify and resonate with her, tell us about the mental health care that you have to take for yourself in your current role, working in an environment of predominantly white males. Because again, having been in the Air Force, in the aerospace community, and being stationed on the Air Force, I know what that's like to be in an environment of predominantly white males. And that's not to say I'm not throwing shade on that environment. I'm saying I know what that's like. So when it comes to your mental health care, similar to what Simone might be dealing with, what is that like for you? And what recommendations do you have for women of color in general?
That's a good question also. So, being in a management position with the company that I work for, I think helps me. There's obviously more stress and more responsibility that comes with that. And so over the years, I've had to refine what that looks like for me in terms of taking care of my mental health. But I also encourage those that work on my team as well to do that. And so for me, it's recognizing if I'm in a situation where I am feeling like it's too much or I need a break. It's acknowledging it, not just trying to keep going and push through, which, Black women are kind of just trained to do. It's like, yes, it's okay to stop, and that could be something very simple. But for me, it's, just going outside of the office, taking a short stroll, listening to music. I have a meditation app on my phone. I'll do a short breathing exercises. It's just going outside, getting fresh air, monthly massages,
Amen journaling. To that. Monthly massages. I'm getting one as soon as we get done with this podcast.
And I like to go hiking. That's another thing I like to do. So it's figuring out what works best for you and acknowledging those moments when you need it, setting aside time, dedicated time for yourself to do those things. It's very important and it's okay. And I think what Simone did was very brave because her reaction that she got was very, very different, as you pointed out. Because she is Black, because she is a woman, the eyes are looking differently upon us, but she still went out there and said that she needed to stop. And that is important now. You know, of course, there's going to be naysayers out there and people that may not understand, or you may think they're going to think that I'm weak if I'm doing this because, uh, nobody else is. But the only person who's walked in your shoes is yourselves. And if you take that time out, that refresher, that 5 minutes or that hour a week, that couple hours a month, that's going to help you in the long run, right? And it's important to just be okay with recognizing that and following through. And it doesn't need to be something that's publicly known or shared. I mean, I talk about it just because I think it's important, and it's not emphasized enough. And people need to be okay with doing whatever works for them, because in the long run, it makes us more productive, happier to be around. I mean, there's so many different benefits to it, and I think it's just important to keep talking about it.
You mentioned the fact that Black women are trained or conditioned to push through no matter what, right? I think I hear the theme for another book in there for Black women. It can still be illustrated like this. I think we could use it though, Stephanie. Just trying to, plant a little seed there. That's all.
All right.
But now I want to ask you a different type of question that might be a little uncomfortable, but I think it's important to keep it real with our audience. Sometimes within our Black community, we lovingly refer to our darker skinned brothers and sisters as dark chocolate drops. And because I often talk about the need to manage intent with impact, I want to know if that's a compliment. And if not, what's the impact of such a statement that is meant to be a compliment, especially from amongst our own?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of little sayings like that within our Black community. I think that one of the themes, or one of the messages that I wanted to get across in my book, was to have open dialogue around colorism. And so, because even in our community, people that are different, we come in all different shades. And you mentioned the paper bag test earlier, right? The lighter that you are, the closer that you could be resembling to white, could get different treatment than, say, you or I. And so, in my opinion, even though I know that is a term of endearment that's meant to say that, you're beautiful, just say you're beautiful. Don't point out the fact that one person is darker than the other. We don't need to identify ourselves in that manner, call each other by our name, or just say whatever it is that you're trying to say. Because the long-term impacts, you don't know who's listening or who's around or how that person's going to interpret it. And the long term of always having that in their head of, I'm dark, and how they're going to navigate through the world, having that message behind them, because society's already going to treat us differently. We don't need to further segregate amongst our own communities. So, and I know that's that would be, something just generational that would have to kind of shift and change over time. But being able to recognize, being, older, I could recognize that, it's not something they're meaning to say offensively, but just say whatever it is directly that you're trying to say versus
I appreciate you. I'm sorry, go on.
I was going to bring up a specific example with, that I've had to kind of combat with my two younger nephews, because they're both of their parents. My sister is she looks like me. She's also darker skin, and their father is a little bit lighter skin, and so the boys are in between, and so they used to refer to my mom as dark grandma, and when they would go over to their father's house, that would be light grandma, and I'm like, nope. That needs to stop right away. That's not how you need to refer to them. There is no difference. They're both grandma. If you need another nickname when you're talking about them, it needs to be something else. So trying to explain to them why that is, that you shouldn't be calling somebody, referring to them as dark or light. they're both grandma.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when they get older, probably explain that more in depth. I don't know how much they
Mm-hmm.
fully understood from what I was trying to tell them, but that's that's the type of stuff that that we can help kind of shift now, make sure
Mm-hmm.
they're not uh, reinforcing those type of messages, and that we're all black.
Mm-hmm. Especially from the perspective of the white gaze, we're all black. It does
Yes,
not matter,
yes, there's
right?
no
I
difference.
really appreciate your willingness to explore that particular question with me. It was not my intention to make you uncomfortable, but I knew that it was something that needed to be discussed and being put out in the open. And I really appreciate you saying, you can set aside dark, just beautiful, because if that's what you're trying to say, that's what you're trying to say. And it
Yes.
reminds me of the example where historically speaking, when white people would like to say, "Oh, you were so articulate," right? And we see
Mhm.
that as not the compliment that they think it is, because to say, "Oh, you're so articulate," and again, this could be a generational thing, it means I didn't expect it of you. You are an anomaly and you're okay to
Yes.
be here, right? And
Yep.
so I have tried to get people to understand that if you say, "Wow, what you just said got me to think," if what I just said got you to think, clearly I was articulate. So you
Yes.
don't even need to bring that in, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And beauty is beauty, and we don't need to define that by you're beautiful and put a shade to it. Beauty is what it is. So I really want
Exactly.
to thank you for allowing me to explore that. And I appreciate your comments and sharing that personal story
Hmm.
about your nephews. I'm
Yes.
hoping that this is going to resonate not just with our community, but with anyone who's listening to us today. I appreciate that. So, the power of your book, in my opinion, to love me is to love the skin I'm in, has a potential, Stephanie, to be life changing. Earlier, when I asked you what was the catalyst, what was your inspiration, and you gave us the story about it was kind of therapeutic and there were other things going on. But from me to you, my friend, I want you to know that I think it has the potential to be life changing, not only for, and I'm going to say this one last time, dark and lovely Black girls, because it's important. That is specifically why you wrote this book, was to bring them in and make them feel as loved as they should be, but
Yes.
also for white parents who adopt children of color. And so just this past week, I recommended your book as a gift, as a Christmas gift to a white woman who has adopted a darker skinned daughter. And this is how she refers to her. And so I wanted to offer this book as a Christmas gift so that she could present to her daughter positive self images and content that she could relate to. So, my question for you is, what impact do you think you can have on other white parents who adopt children of color who might read your book?
First off, thank you for recommending my book to your friend. I think that's what I want. I want it, want it to get out there and to be helpful and impactful for others. And so I think my book can give a perspective, different perspectives to, um, you know, to parents who may adopt uh, darker skinned children or have, uh, you know, their children that are friends with darker skinned children, or they work in an environment where there are darker skinned people, to give them that perspective of, hey, here's how this individual may be feeling
Mhm.
uh, being around other people that don't necessarily look like them, to give
Mhm.
them that perspective of, taking a step back and saying, are we being inclusive? Are we creating an environment that's inclusive? Do they feel welcome? Do they feel open to be able to freely express themselves, and just being more cognizant of the dialogue that could be happening? Or, um, you know, there's a lot of stories in the book of, um, creating a situational awareness about what it's like to be uh, a darker skinned woman in a society where um, that is always noticed and stood out from. And so I think as a parent, this would be a great book to read with your children, and to have conversation and dialogue about, and get their feedback. What do you think about this? And have you ever felt like this, in a classroom setting, or at home, or anywhere outside of school? Have I ever made you feel like this? What can I do differently? How could I have said this differently? And so the big thing is just talking about it. We don't always have the answers, ourselves, because we don't know what that experience is as a white parent, or a white colleague, or a white friend. The only way is to continue to educate yourselves, and to have that open dialogue, to read books, to be open and sharing those experiences with people of different backgrounds and cultures, so that you can learn, and we can learn from each other, and help one another and grow. And so I think if your friend reads this, and with their child, and they have that open dialogue and conversation, that's just going to help their relationship bond and grow in a positive manner. And so I hope that type of dialogue is happening. I know that is part of the intent of why I wrote the book, is to spread the message, not only to women that are young children that are darker skinned, but how to help others navigate around that, and to understand what that experience is like.
Well, Stephanie, I enjoyed the book immensely. In case you didn't get that from our conversation, I mean, seriously, I read the book and I'm like, I need to read this again, because there's some deep stuff in this children's book. I absolutely loved it. It's been delightful to have you on the show today. Our theme for the month is gratitude, and I'm so grateful for your book and the lessons that I've learned as a result. Again, community, the title of the book is To Love Me is to Love the Skin I'm In, by Stephanie Carter. Stephanie, where can people order your book in time for Christmas?
Yes. Great Christmas gifts. So one of the ways you can get it is by just going to my website, which is www.stephaniecbooks.com. You can order through there. If you would like me to sign and autograph your book, I will mail it directly to you. Another way you can go through is Amazon. That's the fastest way to get it if you're not interested in having me sign it. And that is also helpful for me to help get my ratings up on Amazon. So you just type in the title of the book and it'll pop up.
Absolutely. By the way, what city are you in?
I'm in Moreno Valley.
Okay, we need to figure out a way to get a signature on my book, because there's no signature, so we need to work that out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Stephanie Carter, author of To Love Me is to Love the Skin I'm In. You have got to get this book. It really does have the potential to be life-changing, especially, I think, for parents who choose to adopt a little girl of color. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. Community, remember, it's the month of Thanksgiving. What are you grateful for? Who can you be grateful for? And when I think about Stephanie, I'm grateful for her. When I think about what I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for this story that she's decided to share with us. Stephanie, thank you for sharing your creative side with us. Again, community, this is Dr. Anita with another episode of Lived Experiences. Until next time, I'm reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.